They call it the greatest game of all. Born in the backstreets of Sydney in 1908, built on rebellion, toughness, and working class pride, Rugby League was never meant to be polished. It was raw, violent, and real. And from that chaos came legends. Moments so wild they became folklore, riots, broken jaws, fans burning down stadiums, and heroes who played through horrific pain and injuries that would finish ordinary men. For decades, League was Australia's best kept secret, a brutal code that lived in pubs, paddocks, and heartland towns. But now, that secret's getting out. This isn't just a sport. It's folklore written in mud, blood, and memory. This is the story of the greatest game of all, and its most unforgettable folklore moments that have occurred since the sport first was born in 1908. In the years before planes, the Australian national team known as the Kangaroos would have to sail by boat for months to England to verse the England national team. It was a circus at sea, boxing on deck, drinking marathons, and wild stopovers through places like Fremantle, Colombo, Aden, Suez, and Naples. A famous event from the 1933 Kangaroo Tour is that while stopped in Egypt, players vanished on a camel ride pub crawl and nearly missed the ship. During that same tour, the chaos turned tragic. Young star Ray Morris took a blow to the ear during sparring on the ship. The wound became infected and he died in Malta before the team ever reached England. On that same tour, 2 players jumped ship in France chasing pro contracts. They were banned for life. In 1935, East player Dave Brown scored 38 tries in just 15 games, still a record to this day. In one match, Brown bagged 5 tries and 15 goals. That's 45 points on his own, which is also still a record to this day, nearly a century later. He played with his head wrapped in leather to hide cauliflower ears. Pure dominance, the best player of the 1930s. In 1942, a player by the name of Brian Bevan debuted for Eastern Suburbs Sydney. While most Aussie stars stayed home, Brian Bevan became a god in England. Over 23 years, he scored 796 tries between both the Australian and European Rugby League competitions, the most by any rugby player ever. His legend still echoes through Warrington, which is where he scored 620 out of those 796 tries. When he died in 1991, Warrington fans lined the streets as his coffin passed, a send-off for the greatest try scorer the game has ever seen. Back home in Australia, another unstoppable force was just beginning to rise, a team that would go on to dominate the next decade. That team was the St. George Dragons. From 1956 to 1966, the St. George Dragons won 11 straight premierships. Yes, you heard that right, 11 straight premierships. The greatest dynasty in the history of world sport.
And that'll be the end of the game. And so at the Sydney Cricket Ground, this 1966 premiership, the 11th in succession, a world record, has been won by St. George.
Tutty grasping possession, but St. George win 23-4, taking their 11th successive premiership, a world record in any code of football.
The next closest is the Boston Celtics, who won 11 titles in 13 seasons between 1957 and 1969. And just within the rugby league world, the next best is South Sydney, who won 5 straight competitions between 1925 to 1929. Wigan over in England, who won 6 straight titles between 1990 and 1995. And of course, the modern-day Penrith Panthers, who won 4 straight titles between 2021 and 2024. In 1963, after St. George won their 8th straight premiership, opponents Norm Provan and Arthur Summons shared a muddy hug that captured everything about league spirit. That match, which was played at the Sydney Cricket Ground, was brutal, rain-soaked war. The field turned into a swamp, visibility was poor, and every player finished caked in mud that day. St. George eventually won 8-3, but both captains were utterly spent. At full time, Arthur Summons walked over to Norm Provan, congratulated him, and the two men shared a brief, muddy embrace, one of mutual respect between enemies who had just gone through hell together. That moment became the NRL trophy as we know it today. In 1969, South sharpshooter fullback Eric Sims turned field goals into a weapon, nailing 19 in one season. In one match against Penrith, he kicked 5 field goals, all from long range, each worth 2 points at the time. His precision and field goal strategy forced the league to change the field goal to just 1 point. He kicked 86 career field goals, a record to this day. One man, Eric Sims, literally changed the scoreboard. First hit up of the 1970 grand final. Bang! A punch from Manly's John Bucknall shattered South's captain John Sattler's jaw in 2 places. Blood poured down his chin. He just spat, gritted his teeth, and continued to bark orders. Teammates reportedly didn't even realize how bad it was because he did just literally keep barking orders to his teammates, talking through a broken jaw to keep his team focused. He played the next 70 minutes, tackling and remaining heavily involved, and South went on to win 23-12. After full time, doctors said it took a week before he could open his mouth again. The kind of pain no one should endure, but Sattler turned it into legend. In 1978, Manly were caught in a final system with no extra time. Every draw meant a full replay. The result of that? A nightmare stretch of 6 games in just 24 days for Manly. They drew with Parramatta, replayed midweek, then beat West, only to draw the grand final against Cronulla 11-all. 3 days later, they had to do it all again. Half the team were playing on painkillers and strapping, but somehow they powered through and won the replay 16-0. The 1978 Manly side didn't just win the comp, they outlasted it. Known as the SCG Bloodbath in 1981, the minor semi-final between Newtown and Manly was violent. The opening scrum detonated. All 26 players went at it. Fists, boots, chaos. Steve Bowden and Mark Broadhurst traded blows until Broadhurst's eye socket shattered. Bowden was sent off. Newtown still won 20-15. At the end of that same year in 1981, Parramatta finally won their first premiership. After 73 years of heartbreak, Parramatta finally broke through. What followed was euphoria that turned to chaos. As thousands of fans poured onto Cumberland Oval, the celebration became an all-out riot. Supporters ripped up the goalpost, tore down the fence, and someone, no one knows exactly who, set the grandstand on fire. By the morning, the old wooden structure was nothing but ashes. Parramatta's first title had literally burned the house down. The smouldering remains became the symbol of a rebirth. The club rose from the ruins, and Parramatta Stadium was eventually built on that same very site. In 1983, it was Origin at its nastiest. In Game 1, Queensland enforcer Les Boyd lined up New South Wales's Darryl Broman, who had just been called into the side for his long-awaited debut. Moments after Broman passed the ball, Boyd swung a wild right elbow that shattered Broman's jaw in 2 places, blood everywhere. Broman's season was over, and so were his hopes of touring with the Kangaroos later at the end of that year. Boyd was suspended for 12 months, one of the longest bans in Origin history. And that hit became a symbol of just how violent the early years of State of Origin were. For Broman, it was tragedy. For Boyd, infamy. The tackle that ended a man's dream also defined the era when State of Origin was truly win at any cost. Beyond the Broman jaw incident, Boyd was later banned again for 12 months, but this time for an eye gouge. The 1988 grand final was meant to be Ellery Hanley's stage. The British superstar brought to the Balmain Tigers to deliver a title. But just minutes in, as Hanley darted across halfway, Bulldogs playmaker and 5'8" Terry Lamb came flying in with a swinging arm that caught him flush on the jaw. Hanley collapsed, concussed, and never returned. Without their captain and match winner, Balmain were broken and Canterbury coasted to a 24-12 victory. Lamb was never penalised, but the hit became one of the most controversial in league history. Was it an accident or a deliberate knockout in a grand final? Hanley never spoke much about it, but Balmain fans still say that moment cost them the premiership. One hit, one champion gone, and a grand final changed forever. The very first hit-up of the 2014 grand final, and Sam Burgess runs straight into James Graham. His cheekbone shatters instantly. You can see it in his face. The pain, the shock, but he doesn't come off.
And calling for the trainer. He's got the head of James Graham. The poster boys of this grand final have come together.
For the next 80 brutal minutes, he keeps charging, tackling, and leading. Every contact sends a jolt through his skull, but Burgess refuses to quit. South Sydney hadn't won a premiership in 43 years, and he wasn't about to stop them now. When the siren finally sounded, Burgess collapsed in tears, face swollen, speech slurred, but history made. Burgess became the modern echo of John Sattler, who captained Souths to glory in 1970 with a broken jaw in 2 places. 2 men, decades apart, both bleeding for the same jersey, both turning pain into legend. Burgess won the Clive Churchill Medal that day, and his performance became instant folklore. And then there's Cameron Smith. Over 19 seasons, he became the game's conductor. Smith played a record 430 NRL games, captained more than 300 of them, and won 310 of them. All records that may never be broken. He also holds the record for most tackles by any player ever, most points by any player ever, most State of Origin appearances ever, most games as Queensland captain ever, as well as captained the Australian Kangaroos for 10 straight years between 2008 and 2017. His record as Australian captain is 30 wins and 3 losses, which is a 91% win rate. He also won 2 Dally M medals, 9 Dally M Hooker of the Year awards, 4 Wally Lewis medals for State of Origin Player of the Series, won 11 State of Origin series in 12 years, 2 Golden Boot awards for Best Player of the Year worldwide, 5 grand finals, 2 Rugby League World Cups with Australia.
The Kangaroos have done it. They have won the World Cup on home soil. And Cameron Smith crowns an extraordinary year as he leads his nation to victory.
And yet what set him apart wasn't flash brilliant athletic ability. It was control and composure, leadership and smarts. He could slow a game down to his heartbeat. Where others ran on instinct, Smith played chess, reading momentum, shaping tempo, pulling invisible strings. In his final game, the 2020 Grand Final, Smith showed exactly why he was different. With Melbourne clinging to a lead, he didn't just defend it, he literally slowed the entire second half down to his pace, controlling every ruck, every restart, every second. While others panicked, he strangled time itself. The Storm held on, and Smith walked off a champion one last time, beating Penrith in the grand final before they went on to win the next 4 straight titles. So, from players sailing halfway across the world on rickety boats for months, riding camels through Egypt, to fans so wild they burned down their own grandstand in celebration, this game hasn't followed the script. It's been chaos and courage from the very start. So a century on from Sydney's backstreets, and the game has never been better. Record TV ratings and growth year on year. Season openers in Vegas, 250,000 ticket demand for finals games. Here's to another crazy century of rugby league, the greatest game of all. Subscribe for the next data drop.